Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Business Minds broadcast. I'm your host this evening, Adrian Ford, and I'm the COO of the Infinity Firm. I would like to invite everyone to view our broadcast as well as visit our entrepreneur campus at thebusinessminds.com. And I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. This is Michelle Keefer of MK Consulting. And today's topic is what is the real value of education and where is it found? So I'm excited to get into this conversation. But first, Michelle, tell them a little bit about you.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on the show and to help be a part of the really stimulating conversations that we have in the Business Minds campus and kind of bring it out to the forefront so other people can know what we're doing and what we're talking about in this environment. So my name is Michelle Keefer. I've been doing MK Consulting for about 7 years now. My background is in consumer research and strategy. Research and kind of just design thinking as a whole. So what I do with MK Consulting is I work with companies to help them develop not just like a campaign, but like a full marketing department or things where they're really trying to understand the overall strategy of their product or service or brand vision. And I guess to kind of feed into today's topic about the value of education, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I have lots of degrees and I plan on getting more, ironically, despite the conversation we'll have today. I and also, I went into the fields that I went to school for. I'm usually one of the only people at the table that's like, yeah, I got a degree and then went into that field and got a job using that degree. And then went and got another degree, expanding on that field and continued to stay in that field. And now I've been doing it for about 15 years and have, I started off with my bachelor's in advertising and psychology from Texas State, Cats. And then I also have a master's in design research from University of North Texas and an MBA from Texas Women's University. So lots of different types of educational experiences,
Yeah.
both real life, formal academic, hybrid, in the classroom, e-learning. I've seen and done it all. Not to mention I was taking like college classes at the junior college when I was still in high school because I've always been a nerd, I guess.
And nerd is a good term too, by the way. It is a
Yeah.
good term. That means you absorb immense amount. There's so much knowledge,
Well,
and
and you
you
get
learn how to turn
excited
it
about
in.
it. You want to do it. You're
Yeah.
doing it on purpose.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So here we go. What is the real value of education, and where is it found? So let's go.
Oh, such a loaded question. So, to me, when I think about education, it's just about learning and growth, right? And that's the value is so you can grow as a human being. You can better your life, that means professionally or whether you're going to learn something so you can go have a job, or if you want to learn something so you could build a business for yourself, or if you just want to learn to be a better human and think about it from relationship standpoints and how you get along with your spouse or your siblings or your parents or your peers. All of that is fundamentally back into education. And so we think, when we think about education, just the word as Americans in our culture, it's so institutionalized. And so it inherently comes with this sense of like being very rigid, and you have to go to school and then you graduate school and then you go to college. And then if you want a good job, then you have to get even more college, and it's this institutionalized structured environment. But I can tell you that in all the years that I've had just working, learning by fire through trial and error and meeting new people and learning about different ideas, my education that I got from real life experience was easily just as valuable as the education that I got that I paid for that ended up with a diploma at the end of it. And so it's really a mindset thing. And I know that in the Business Minds, we talk a lot about mindset.
It absolutely is. My background being social work, and I did not get a degree in social work. Mine came through political science, and I never used it. And when I got into social work, I learned quickly and the hard way that there is not a book for what we do. There's not a book to people. There's not a book when you have a client who is going through an episode and is in the mood to break things, and one of those things could even be you. And there's not a book to handle that situation. And so I had worked around so many individuals that had went to college for social work and got those great degrees, and they are great human beings. They are. But some of relying on solely that type of education almost ill prepared them to walk out into the real life situations when you're dealing with a client face to face, because it's very hard to remember what was in chapter 6 when there's a client spewing at you and getting ready to go nuts on you. Um, and so, yeah, the real you can't you'll never be able to substitute real world education versus the institutionalized education. It's just almost invaluable.
Yeah.
And then also the wisdom that comes from people that have been doing this longer than you. Um, we always have heard that when I got out of college and I maybe remember 10% of what I learned the entire 4 years I was there. And so it was one of those things where I started learning more from the people that had just been physically working than what I had ever read in a book.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah,
Well, I mean, there's two things I kind of that makes me think of. The first thing is I absolutely agree that there's some breakdown between what you're learning in an academic environment and then what actually happens. And not I mean, in social work and you're dealing with humans, like that's a really like broad example because human behavior is so, unpredictable. But even when you think about like a business degree, you go and you get a marketing degree or a business degree, you can't like go and apply that because they're teaching you like here's theoretically how you would run a company. Well, guess what, your first job is not going to be at a level where you're leveraging any of that information.
right.
And I remember getting so frustrated because I was, fresh out of college, had all these great ideas, like knew by the book like how things were meant to be done, but nothing was actually applicable in any of the jobs that I had. And I did well. I started in mid-level management, and kind of really quickly was able to work my way up. But I think that's just as much of a testament to my work ethic as it is to whether or not, what I had learned in a classroom. But then the other side of that is it's what I started to realize in college, and then especially when I started mentoring young graduates who are like, okay, I have this degree and I don't know what to do with it now. Um, it's the in between the lines at college. It's not necessarily what you learned in the classroom as much as how did you learn how to manage your schedule with all the classes and all the assignments and all of the
Right.
workflow. How did you learn to do task switching where you can deep work on this subject and then turn around and do deep work on another subject? How did you manage with your professors? Did you communicate with your professors when you needed something, or did you just like ghost them? And then you kind of see those same types of behaviors in the business world, right? The people who just like punch in, punch out. They don't really ask a lot of questions. They don't really push back. And maybe they're making mistakes and no, maybe they know, maybe they don't know, like versus the people who come in and, are actively collaborating or reaching out and talking to their managers or setting up, metrics and self accountability. So it's just as much, so it's both sided. Like it's all about your expectations of what you're going to learn while you're
Right.
in this formal academic. Do you think if you're going to college and you think that what you learn from college out of those textbooks is your end all be all, then you're setting yourself up for failure in the real world,
Yeah.
unless you plan on just like staying in academia forever. But even then, academia, like people who are publishing and researching, it's very, very competitive and it's
Yeah.
not a friendly
Absolutely.
space. And it's not enough to just like read something and pass a test. And if that's what your mindset is, then you're wasting a lot of money trying to go to college.
Yeah. You have to be adaptable. You have to be willing to uh, almost go that extra mile, and do those things that no one else really wants to do. I'm a big fan of real world experience. So as much as I love to help people, from my office, uh, I find the real value of going down and hitting the street and just walking and talking to people and getting this insight from people who are actually down there in the trenches versus me talking to someone who has heard about the trenches. And so that real value, it comes from that relationship building. It comes from the wisdom of others that have walked these paths that you're trying to walk. That's one of the main things I love about being an entrepreneur is that it's nonstop learning. It's nonstop learning, and we have this very fun luxury of saying we have seen it all, we have done it all, and then tomorrow we'll be like, okay, so we haven't seen it all. This
Now I've
this is a
seen it
new
all.
one. This is a new one. Okay, and so and then you're like, now I've seen it all, and nothing's gonna top that. And then next week comes, and you're like,
There's something else.
okay, there's something else. So,
Well, and that's just life in general. There's always something else that there's something else to learn or discover or experience. Um, and that's why, when you think about like being busy all the time or overworking or being stressed out about like how much you have to do, it's like, oh, I have to get this project done. It's like, there's another project right behind it. You can't live and die
right,
by this sense of busyness. And that's kind of the same thing with, education. It's for your whole life. Like, yeah, you might go and you get a degree, but that doesn't mean you're done. Like
yeah,
you're going to
absolutely,
learn so much, like applying what you've learned. And that's kind of what I like about what I do from a consumer research and design thinking standpoint. And design research is about, you observe, you take in all the variables, you try to identify, any unintended consequences that might be coming down the line. But then ultimately you have to put something into place, and then you have to learn from it, and the process repeats itself. You reobserve, you readapt, you redefine, and then you put it out there again. And that's like what you're talking about, going out to the streets and meeting people. It's market research, going and talking to people with authentic insights and perspectives that matter to what you're trying to accomplish. But it doesn't matter if you're doing that in some formal academic
yeah.
institutionalized education path, or if you're just out there hustling and
Yeah.
not afraid to take risks and not afraid to take chances, and seeking growth by education. Whether you can educate yourself, you can be educated by people with experience. So it's just really
And
interesting.
I think that's the other big piece of value too is being able to identify what our educational experiences. Um, some people view failure as, well, the only thing I learned was to not do that, and you're not grasping that. No, you learned a lot in that. So if once you begin to identify that every single thing you do is an education, whether you
Can teach you
succeeded, whether
something.
you failed, whether even if you worked with someone and it didn't work out, you're still educated on that situation, on that person, on those dynamics. So you still took something from it. So it's important to always make sure that you're taking something from every single thing. Uh, in the
Well, and that
business
goes
mindset, and
back to
we
like the mindset, right? That goes back to your
right,
mindset. What is your
yeah,
intention? Are you trying to better yourself? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to evolve? And then if you are, then you will, or kind of naturally begin finding learning outcomes in all of these different experiences. But you have to be conscious of it. You have to like check yourself and make sure you're aware of like, am I observing things because I want to learn? Or am I just sliding through glass or sliding through life, just like not
with the
even
blinders.
absorbing any of it? Yeah.
So let me ask you, what are some things that what are some things that became educational pieces for you that you didn't realize were going to teach you the most lessons? You got out of college, and avid learner, all these degrees, avid learner. What was that? What were the few things that you realized I did not encounter that on the way to these degrees? I did not find that in this setting. I had to go out and get it this way.
It comes back to people. People's behavior is ultimately biased, irrational, and unpredictable. And I
Absolutely.
remember the first director of marketing job that I had was at a, telecommunications company. And I was absolutely dumbfounded of how this business was operating. there was nepotism and just the most ridiculous thought processes as to why we would, choose to hire this person over that person, or should we sell this product or that product. And just the whole way the business was structured, the way it was managed, the way that teams interacted with each other, it just absolutely blew me away. But they're a multi-million-dollar a year company, and they're like 25 years old, and still to this day are growing and performing. And I just really struggled with that. I was like, how are these guys finding success when I know there's so many people out there who are, gritting their teeth and doing things the right way and following, doing it the right way, going down the path that they're supposed to, and they're not able to make anything work. And that's when I realized that it's not about doing something the right way or the wrong way. It's all about how confident you are in what you're doing and whether or not you can get people to believe you. Because this company, they had staff, I think they had 45 employees at the time I worked there, and they all drank the Kool-Aid, and they all were happy, and they lived their life. And I felt kind of like a little bit of a snob thinking that, but again, I was just fresh out of college and thought that I knew how it all worked because I had read it in a textbook. And then seeing it work without following a single rule, it just blew my mind. And so that's when I really started to pay attention more to the people side of things. Yes, it's important to know best practices. Yes, it's important to understand what other people have done that has worked for them, just to give you some kind of a basis. But ultimately, every single brand is got to find its own path. Every audience is completely unique and has to have your own relationship with it. Just because you could have a competitor that has the exact same product and service as you, and they could do something in their advertising or in their communications that gets them leads or customers, and you would apply it and it would just not work for you. And that is because checklist marketing, checklist business development, this prescribed path, it's not real. Yeah, it's not real. It's not the end all be all. Everything has to be iterative. Everything you have to test, you have to research, you have to figure out what's going to be true for you. Because once you find it, and then you learn how to scale it, and you learn how to repeat it. And so that was one of the biggest learning opportunities for me in my entire life. And I worked there for almost 2 years. And I got recruited to go work for another company. And I was like, thank God, it's over. And I was so relieved, and that's, 10, 12 years ago. And I look back at that job so fondly. And I'm just like, man, I learned so much being surrounded by people acting like idiots and doing things wrong, and me constantly having to fix and solve problems and find holes. And, and I was able to, contribute, a lot of organization and, data organization specifically. They had their CRM was, anyway, I digress. So, that's a big standout.
So did it become, learning that and adapting to that, did you find out that was something easy for you to almost kind of pass on to others? Or is it that you kind of just kept in your tool bag? But is that something easier to teach to other people, or are you more like, well, you're gonna kind of have to figure this out the same way I did? Because some of that stuff isn't teachable. It's one of those things where you'll know when you're learning it. You'll know when you stumble upon it. If you kind of got that twinkle in your eye, then you just kind of know. And so
Yeah.
it's not one of those teachable things.
Well, and that, again, I feel like a broken record. It's a mindset thing. If you have a frustrating job and you think that it's terrible, what can you learn from it? From a standpoint of how can your future self and your future career and where you're going, what can you look back here and take out as nuggets? But then also, where can you find a chance to really try to put your fingerprint on something to learn, or to not just learn for yourself, to teach somebody else, or to better understand them. And that is something that you can't really teach someone to do, that inquisitive nature, that willingness to observe what's going on, or why and question why things are happening the way they are. But when I talk to people, I tell them, if you have a shitty job, try to sink into it and figure out what about it that makes it uncomfortable. or not something that you want to be doing, and what is it that you would do better in this person's perspective, or if you're in that role, how would you be different, or if you're in this other role, and kind of visualize, what you would think about it differently. So then when you are in your next role, you are in your next business, you have more variables to consider. Because if you are always in a space where people just, function and everything just kind of goes down the flow and you work in your little silo and everything goes along, then, you don't have a much value to add in the next space. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
All
again,
right.
it's just
Well,
get comfortable with being uncomfortable and seeing what you can learn from those perspectives.
okay. So let's switch gears a little bit back to the education piece, and I'll word it this way so it flows. Um, okay. So let's say I already have the mindset. I already have the
Mhm.
mindset. I know where I want to go, how I want to get there. I know what I want to do. How do I? But I'm also stuck in this vehicle where my entire family has done it this way. They've all been on this. They all went to this college. My grandfathers that went there. My father, mom and dad met in that college. My brother and sisters, they've gone there. But I know with my mindset and with what I want in a life, I know that that's not necessarily the best route. How do I get out of that very, very fast feeding car?
That's so tough because I am a big fan of breaking cycles. And if
Right.
it's not what is right for you, then you have to find your power and taking that risk and choosing a path that ultimately is your life's work, and where you have to, answer to what type of life you're going to live. Um, but it's tough to just be like, oh, well, I'm just going to not go to college because I don't think I need it, unless you have something else lined up. So if you are going to make a risk like that, you have to really be prepared to work really hard to compensate for it.
Right.
Um, it's, what I ended up doing is I changed my major a whole lot of times. My undergraduate, I started off in one thing and then switched to something else and switched to something else. I had to take lots of like summer school and night hours to make up for it. So it wasn't in college. So it wasn't in my undergrad for 7 years. But to me, that was the best thing because I got to see what I actually really liked, and and there were things that I would think that I wouldn't want to learn in college that I would rather learn for myself. But you don't know until you hear it coming out of a professor's mouth, or you get into a group project where you're expected to collaborate with people and be like, yeah, this isn't for me. And so my inclination, try it just to appease your family, and then, have a plan. Use what you experienced in that first semester or that first year as your stepping stones of how your plan is going to progress without going down that path. But if you already know what that is and you are set in that mindset and you know that this is not what it is, then have a business conversation and say, look, you're about to spend $150,000 on my education, or we can spend that $150,000 on a startup. And this is what I can do. And this is how I'm going to hire. And this is what my product is going to be. And this is what production and distribution are going to look like.
And I came to
And
that without going to college. Like that's yeah. So and that right there, that's real value of where does education come from? Because it didn't take me going to college to understand that. But
well,
the other thing that the other trend that I'm noticing that you were on throughout your entire college experience, leading all the way up to your professional experience, is that a lot of your real education was powered by self-awareness.
oh, absolutely. There was no shortage of internal work and perseverance that I had to take that allowed my formal education to be combined with my professional experiences to find the success that I have found doing what I do. There are just as many people who graduated right next to me and didn't put in the work, and they're doing whatever they're doing, and there are just as
Right.
many people who are standing next to me that have busted their butts and come from a not a formal academic background. And the beautiful thing is right now, it's 2020, the world is on fire. COVID's got everybody working from home, like all of these crazy variables, but not just the zeitgeist of 2020. Just looking at like the past 5 years, the gig economy is live and well. People want to work remotely and travel. This concept of you go to high school, then you get a degree, and then you get a job for 40 years, and then you retire, and then you experience your life it's dying. Like people don't want to live that way anymore. And so
Wow.
for there's a shift occurring where it is kind of becoming more and more socially acceptable to be like, you know what, I'm not going to go down this formal educational path, and I am going to, let life educate me and build something for myself. And, really turn my passions into skills that I can monetize so I can,
Yeah.
travel and be where I want to be and live the life that I want to live. And so I
And
think
that's
if you
a
are struggling with this conversation right now within your family, this is the best time to win. 10 years ago, this is a harder conversation to win, but now
yeah.
you can get out of the car and say, listen, family, the work that you did empowered me to be successful without having to do college. I can be successful without it. And that would not be possible without, the lineage of all the hard work that brought you to a place where you can be in a mindset to think about those things. Because let's face it, if you're not in a healthy, safe and secure home environment, you're probably not thinking about college, but more than that, you're also probably not, sketching out business plans on napkins either. Your
No.
mind's not there. And so there is a certain amount of gratitude that you've got to be able to express, whether you want to go to college or not, that you're even able to have that internal dialogue.
Oh, and even what you just said about having that conversation with your family, that's a very that's a very rare generational kink in the chain for some people. Of we're used to the negative generational curses, right? Of mental health and drugs and alcoholism and things like that. But there's also this other side of, I know
Here's the
everybody's went
family
to college.
business. Here's the
This is
family
the
cost,
yeah,
the family
yeah.
life. Here's the package. You should live this
And
way.
here's also the family student loan debt. So, that I have seen, and you're not wrong for not wanting that, especially if I have identified a route that doesn't lead down that
That
road.
doesn't require it. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
ten
because
thousand
it's,
for a startup is better than 10,000 in books, depending on if you
yeah,
have your plan together.
well, and it's all such a books are a scam. College textbooks are a total scam. And that's the thing about it that has gotten me more and more jaded over the years is, you know, it seems like formal education is less and less about what is actually good for you and how can I empower you to live your best life as a student, as an individual, as a human being, versus, it's just this collective perpetuation of a cycle, this generational cycle that we as Americans have consumed to be the way that we find success. And it's a, global economy has exploded, in the last 10 years, especially. Um, Success doesn't have to be so arbitrarily defined by just our culture anymore, because we can work with people from other countries, and we can travel, and we can remote and commute with each other from different places. The technology that's available, places like, not, shameless plug, Business Minds community, there are resources out there that people want to teach you how to succeed in business. There are resources
Absolutely.
out there where people want to teach you how to succeed in, learning how to code, or learning how to be a designer, or learning how to, be exceptional at customer service. And they just get stuck in these little silos of feeling like they can't do it, or if they didn't go to college right after high school, then that's it. Like they've missed their window, and they can never have,
Yeah.
they can never level up. Some of the very, very best marketing people that I know come from like service industry. They waited tables, they were bartenders, and how many people, you don't, if you have those skills, you can predict needs, you can communicate to people, you can follow a process. Their job providers out there that want those tacit skills, but then there's this breakdown of, well, I don't have a degree, so I can't apply. And your algorithm that's filtering through resumes is automatically going to kick me out. And that's where I feel like the next big, frontier is for how we evolve this culture as a whole is in that hiring space, and how closed-minded our hiring checklist has become. Yeah, I'm a big advocate for helping people find jobs that just based on those non-teachable things.
Yeah, it's putting people in those places, in those boxes that, because you don't check this box that we feel like, society should have had you check. You're not good enough to do this or good enough to do that. Yet you're not really getting a chance on your resume to say, but I have found the education, I have found the experience elsewhere. And it's actually more valuable than what was in that book that you want me to have read. Yeah, there's a new wave coming.
There
And
absolutely is. And I see more and more recruiters working this way, where it's all about that personal connection. They just want to talk to you. They want to get to meet you or get to know you. And then they want you to meet the employers and the business organizations who don't care as much. I mean, think about like a customer success team. You need people skills, and you need, anything else can be trained. I was talking to someone the other day, and it was for a technical job. It was a support role, and we talked about all the things. We're like, but really underneath it all, like, what does this person have to have? And it was almost everything they listed and talked about were personality traits. It's like I can teach them how to use the program. I can teach them how to say what I want them to say. I can provide scripts and training. But whenever they sent me their job listing and like the hiring criteria, everything was about all of these hard skills, about like, what's your job? What are your certifications? Like all this stuff. And so I called them back. I was like, this doesn't match. You told me you needed to hire this type of person, but what you provided to hire, like, would feel, there's a lot of people who would qualify that wouldn't even apply to this job because the way you presented it. I'm like, yeah. And so we're reworking it, and, it's leading. You don't have to have experience to apply. And you can say that it's allowed to hire people. You're allowed to hire people without experience because you can train them. And people, it feels good to be valued. And if you're the first company that's going to reach out and give someone a chance and really value them and give them an opportunity to become educated within your brand and the way you want to run your business, you asked me earlier about like what sticks, like, man, that's going to be something that sticks with somebody for a long time. And the loyalty that you're going to get out of them, and the work ethic and the heart and the, the endurance you'll get out of it is just going to be so much greater.
Oh, and that's the corporate America way, right? The corporate America way is well, I'm glad you went there, and congratulations on graduating that feat. But we're going to teach you our way. We're
Yeah,
going to
now you
teach
have
you
to start
we're going
completely
to
all
show you the
over.
Bank of America way. We're going to show you we're going to show you the Nike way. You're going to adopt our way. It's the Patriot way. So we're going to show you these things. So then there's a brief moment you're sitting there like, so nothing I did, you're not gonna nothing I did matter. You're still gonna just train me your way. And that's what it comes down to.
And that's why it feels so scammy for so many people. And that's why there are more and more people having these types of conversations of, I don't need to be in school. Like I said, for my undergraduate, I had a lot of fun. When I graduated, I would never in a million years thought that I was going to go back to school again. But, life had different plans for me, and I had my daughter and got a family started and realized like, oh, maybe I do want to go back to school to level up. And, I was really fortunate to get into a program that was an extraordinary learning experience, but it was completely untraditional. It was interdisciplinary. It was all collaborative. It was one small cohort. There was like 12 or 14 of us that varied. And we went through the whole 24 months together and learned everything together. And that is not like a traditional, master's or, postgraduate experience.
Right.
And, and it's just it's just so hard to put into words, and I'm a words person, and so for me not to have words is kind of astounding, but it's
Well, from a business standpoint, wouldn't you say it's almost in some ways more cost effective versus having to hire someone and now you're going to show them the way you want your company to be ran, but you have to go through a process with them of not only training them but also having them unlearn what they've been used to, because that's not how you want your company ran, versus
well
bringing
and
somebody who said I don't have the experience and you say, well, that's perfect because you're a blank slate to me, so now I can really mold you and create you that I want you, and now I trust you when it's time to move up because I know
yeah,
we've created this,
yeah,
versus that unlearning process that you have to go through, um, because now you're not only training the person, you're having to train them against what the last
what
two or
they
three people
learned,
have
yeah.
trained them. So
Well, and I think that, and that's I like that when you would view someone who's green as like a blank slate, someone that I can learn it and invest into. If that business is coming with the right intention, I want to invest in this person because I want them to be not only be successful as they work for me, but I want them to stay with me and work here for a long time.
right,
There's so many organizations that are just like, we'll just hire junior people out of college just because we can pay them less. And it's just
yeah,
like,
but you get what you pay
so
for.
well, but the thing is about it is like, these are the same companies who come to your high school and tell you you can't work for us unless you go to college. But you go through all of this, you go through all the college, all of the debt, all of the financial burden of it for you to come out on the other side of it and be like, all right, we're going to pay you as little as we possibly can, and now we'll train you what we want you to learn. it's
Right.
it's counterproductive from so many different levels. I don't understand how the economy just I don't know. I don't want to get into an economics conversation because that's not what this is.
No, no, it's not. I have tried to steer from that because it's hard to not go near that.
It's
But
hot. Well, it's also integrated together, and
yeah,
it's culture, and it's the way we think about our economy. It's the way that our culture works. It's the way that we motivate 10-year-olds in
yep.
elementary school. You have to do good on your STAR testing so we can, get you here, so we can get past this next test, to pass the next test, to get into college, to pass a bunch of tests, to get a piece of paper, to start off at square one where nobody's
Well,
going to give you any
and not even
chance.
just that, but you think about how much we focus on education, and to even piggyback on the examples of, get this test score, read this book, do this, and then they focus so much on the curriculum part and on the educational piece that when they finally get into corporate America, they learn, well, this is a relationship business, and I have not worked on people skills. I have not focused on building true, genuine interactions with people. And
There's actually a study that came out about like valedictorians and salutatorians, these people that, graduate at the very top of their class, and then they come and look at what they're doing 10 years later. And a lot of them are not that successful because they don't know how to do anything but regurgitate information for a test. That's what
right,
they were good at. That's what allowed them to become a valedictorian. Whereas that person who was a C student and slid as a C student all the way through and maybe should have failed a couple of times, but had a good relationship with their professors, and so they didn't, those are your CEOs. Those are the
yes,
people who are, taking
the
risks and
mouthpiece. The mouthpiece, that is one thing that I learned was of value to me, was that it's great that I know a lot, I can quote with the best of them, but I can adjust this mouthpiece to whoever, whenever, however. And that's one of those arts, it's almost one of those soft skills that is
yeah, it's like
widely
dating.
yeah, it's widely overlooked, but you don't realize, like, that's what gets you in the door, is this likable
Yes,
personality. Your
yes.
resume is great. Your resume is a list of your accomplishments. The very next thing I need to know is, but are we going to get along every day? Can I talk to you? What is not on your resume that is going to impact my business and grow my business? That's what's of valuable.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we were saying, it's what you learn in between the lines. And I think that translates to whether it's institutionalized education or if it's a tough first job or waiting tables or whatever it is. It's not the task itself, it's not the deliverable itself, it's learning how to approach problems, learning how to recognize gaps, learning how to communicate and feel comfortable asking questions, learning to feel comfortable to ask for help and to lean on the resources that you have available to you. Learning how to manage your time, learning how to know where to set your boundaries so you don't run into burnout. That is what that's educate that's the most valuable thing. And so whether or not you want to learn that through formal education or through life by fire and hustling and just trying to make something happen for yourself, if that's what your mindset is and those are your goals, then you're going to be successful at education.
Did you feel like the times you felt like, I'm done with school and then, no, I'm gonna go back and get a degree. Do you feel like each time as you got older, of course, and as wisdom, took its place with you, did you feel like you were able to be more pointed as you chose which degrees you wanted to go after next? Like you kind of started to figure out your own system, like, almost like I wish I knew now what I knew then, because
Absolutely.
it's more pointed.
Well, yeah, and I think that's another thing that sucks about American education systems is that we force you to go through all of these like generic broad education or topics and subjects just to prove that you're capable of learning. And then it's not until you get to postgraduate, and even then it's only the second half of your postgraduate where you get to like fully zero in on something you're interested in. I know that this is a model in like some private schools, but also in a lot of other countries, that they start introducing those passion-based topics much earlier on. So it's not just about, learning for the sake of learning. It's learning something that you actually care about. So you pay attention and you invest yourself into it. And that's why I said at the beginning too, like, I'm planning on getting another degree because I want a doctorate in consumer behavior, because I have pinpointed consumer behavior as being like my jam. I love it and I can do it all day, every day. And so for me, there is value for me to continue my education because I do want to research. I do want to publish. I do want to, help other businesses think about this at a greater scale. But that's my path. And
But it didn't start with consumer. It didn't start with consumer.
no, it
That was
definitely,
where like that real world education, that real interaction was like, okay,
yeah.
now I know where I need to be.
But
And
it was me learning that this was something I cared about as a
right,
human. And then academia gave me vocabulary to put on top of it to say, okay, this is what you're talking about. Because I've always
right.
cared. Like even when I was little, I remember being 10 years old, watching commercials and thinking about like, who did they make this commercial for? Like, why did they
Yeah,
make this commercial look like this? Or seeing a
there's a
billboard and like,
lot of people who have that thought.
yeah. And so when I was changing degrees at Texas State over and over and over, and I took an advertising class, and that was like the class where we watched commercials and analyzed them, I was like, y'all, I found my people.
Yeah.
So,
So we had a
but
question come in. Hold on, really quick. We got a
okay,
question coming from the business minds, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but we're being asked to touch on it again. And the
okay.
question is, how do you convince your parents and friends that you want to start a business rather than go to college? Um, and so I can say really quick, just before you get started, I know you're good with this answer. Uh, I've always said that one of the hardest things, particularly for young men and young women, is to do what God's called you to do versus what your parents want you to do. And those aren't always the same thing. And those are two, even in my life, those are two dramatically different paths. And so we touched on a little bit earlier how to have that conversation with your family, but just let's go back just one more time real quick about how that conversation should go and what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. agree. You have to follow your conviction and your heart. And if you are trying to make a case that, oh, I just don't want to go to college, I'll start a business instead, you're probably not going to find success at convincing them to, well, here, I'll write you a check for $100,000 instead.
Right.
Try not to,
Right.
don't spend it all in one place. But you have to show that you're committed, and commitment to the vision is critical if you're going to be successful anyway. It doesn't matter
Absolutely.
if you're convincing your parents to invest in you instead of investing into this institutionalized path that has lots of data proving that it's not quite as effective as it once was. There's lots of data showing the burden of debt and things like that. And so it becomes a conversation of investing in me and investing in my vision and what I want to create for myself. You have to know that it's going to take 3 to 5 years before you're up and running and really finding success in what you're doing. So whatever you're getting funded and whatever you're doing during those 3 to 5 years, you're testing, you're iterating. It has to be consistently committed to a vision. If you are going to flip-flop around, and you're going to set yourself up to fail. And so if you are going to have that conversation, don't just go into it like, well, I know that I want to run my own business and I don't want to go to college. If that's true, then I challenge you to dig in deep. What are things that you like to do? What are things that you're good at? What are things that people have told you you're good at? And figure out what that business plan is. Don't go to have that conversation without also being prepared to answer a lot of tough questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, what does this look like? What is the business going to be? What is your market going to be? Who are your competitors? Are you developing something new? How much does that technology cost? Do you need to prototype something? Or is it a service, or is it an app? Or, you have to have thought it all the way through. And there's a lot of really great resources on how to think that all the way through without having to go to college. Chris, actually, within the Business Minds community, he published something in one of the market research channels about like this really robust, just like thought process of all the things you should consider when you're taking your product into launch. And so if you're at the point where you're saying, I want to start a business, you're not anywhere close to taking it to product launch yet, but
Right.
You should still be aware of what's coming down the path. And if you're not ready to commit to all of it, including the failure, including those tough conversations when you're not doing quite right, including those tough times when you need to ask for help or get resource or expert resources, you commit to all of that. And when you are, and you go to your parents and you say, this is what I'm going after, and this is what I want you to invest in, and this is what I want to build, and this is the future self that I'm creating, then you're gonna convince them.
Yeah. And I'll add that convincing them doesn't just start when you're a senior within days of graduation deciding
Yeah,
like,
this isn't something you
nah,
formulate a week out. Say,
this is something that you show them as you're maturing into a young woman, young man, because one of the biggest things that college does tell people is that you know how to finish things, is that you
yes,
start something and you complete something. So if you're choosing to not go that route, then you need to, it's almost like you, even at a young age, you have business credit. So you need to show that you have started and completed multiple things leading up to this decision that make them raise your credit, that have them trust you, that you can continue on this path. Have
yeah.
you seeked out wisdom? Have you listened to their wisdom as you've come up? You
And
know,
if you
so
haven't, so if you're a senior, so let's say you are, you just graduated, you had your socially distanced high school graduation a few weeks ago, and you don't know what business you want to have, and that's totally reasonable. Also, when you're 18 years old, who you think you want to be when you
absolutely.
grow up is going to be different than who you think you're going to be when you're 25 or 35 or 55 even. There's a do like what Adrian's talking about. So I know I don't want to go to college because I don't think that's I want to build something for myself. I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but I want to find out. So I'm going to get a job working for somebody at a lower level, or I'm going to do community service or volunteer or find a nonprofit that's in this space. You have to find something and start testing it out and testing your theory. You can't just decide that this is, nothing's just going to come to you because you want it, unless you're working towards it. And so And then that does give you the space, like, well, maybe I want to do this, so I'm going to try it for a little bit. Oh no. Or I'll try over here, and oh no, maybe try over here. And that's kind of the same thing as like what I did when I was changing majors all of those times. Like, test it out, see what you like. Don't let yourself get comfortable. You've got to make ends meet. Fine, get a job waiting tables, or working in, whatever store, whatever you can do. There's a lot of really great remote jobs too available.
Right.
Just have something consistent. Show that you can start something. Show that you can finish something. When you want to quit a job, understand why and be able to articulate why you're leaving that job and understand what
quit correctly. Quit correctly. Don't just walk
don't
out.
burn bridges.
2 weeks.
Not worth it.
And also make sure you have somewhere else to go before you quit.
Yes. Yep. And GoFundMe doesn't account, is not a plan.
It's not a side gig, no. But the thing about it is there's a lot more resources these days. I mean, when we were growing up, there wasn't podcasts, there weren't all these action guys. You had Cliff Notes. And there were little magazines you could read and articles you could read about the people that you idolize and made it. But I mean, now there's so many resources. And I mean, I think, and that's what the Business Mind campus is it's this campus that's specifically geared towards entrepreneurship, that if you have a resource that you cannot find on a college campus. Colleges have their resources, they have their books, and now you have yours here. And that's exactly the way we wanted to create it. We wanted to create this space where if you were starting from scratch, didn't really know which way you wanted to go, you can get on the Business Minds and you can message Michelle Keefer, and she can tell you right now, she can give you these pointed tips. So instead of you trying to
I'm on there too. I go and say, hey, you guys, I'm getting stuck. Even now, even though I've been doing this for all this long, I need it's support,
we say we're getting stuck. Absolutely.
And that's the thing, again, back to education. You just have to constantly be trying. You have to commit to what you want to do. And and that's why mission statements are really important when you're starting a business. Every choice should be backed back into that mission statement as to whether or not you're getting closer to it. And so have a mission statement for yourself and for your own life, and make your choices based on your commitment to that vision for yourself. And if a formal education gets you closer to who you want to be, then that's the right choice. But if you can look at that and honestly say, like, I don't need it, then you don't have to do it. You have other options. As long as your mindset is because you want to grow and you want to learn and you want to be better, then there's so many ways to learn.
There is. And I think that's even like a good place to stop, because the real value of education isn't just in college, but it's in other people. It's in talking to Michelle Keefer about what are the pitfalls you sit in this great space of straddling both sides. I know I've hit some brick walls in college. I've hit some brick walls in entrepreneurship, and I can tell you what it's like on both sides of these things. But the education is the real value in education is solely where you get it from, and it's not from one place.
It's all about your mindset.
It's all about your mindset. And so as long as you're not in a one-stop shop, as long as you're open to receiving it from various people, various places, then success is imminent.
Yeah. And as long as you remember that it's not just about the learning. It's what do you do with what you've learned? How do you execute what you've learned? How do you build on it? How do you test it? How do you send it through the gauntlet to make sure what you learned is actually real? That's where you're going to find your successes in life.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. It's always fun when we talk. Yeah, we can go.
I always like talking to you. We get to the weirdest conversations sometimes, but this is a good one. I think this is such a valuable topic, especially in the realm of entrepreneurship. But just in life in general, there's always something to learn. And so don't put yourself in a box. Don't put learning in a box. Find success.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on. And I'll be talking to you in the Business Mind.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.